building was essential to my childhood. Pillow forts, blanket forts, forts in closets, forts in cabinets, forts in whatever giant box landed on our doorstep or was liberated from the alley behind the Sears on the square. Remember when Sears was on the square? We had forts among the big rooted trees in my grandparents' windbreak forests. And I built at least 100 forts on the landing of the steps, which was this perfect, cozy spot. And to be honest, I don't remember what we did in the forts. The fun wasn't having a fort, but in building the fort, in creating that little space, in having walls between us and the real world, in carving out a space that could, at least in our imaginations, had everything we ever dreamed of. Nowadays, I'm mostly in the fort stabilizing business, a little less imagineering architecture, a little bit more structural engineer, if you know what I mean. And yet, if I'm honest, I still probably do a pretty good job of putting walls up between me and the rest of the world. I convince myself that the walls that I put up are for my protection. Protection against what, I wonder? And my best guess is something like vulnerability and sorrow and pain. We want our faith to be walls like that, either to protect us from the bad things that can happen, or at least tell us why they happen, because we think that will help us hurt less. But it doesn't work. Some fortress. When our walls come down, we hope and pray that God is a mighty fortress. But we are wise to remember that God also promises to be a very present help in times of trouble. It is always tricky to read John's gospel. I remember the summer when we were the church with the tents, worshiping outside, and a few times Beth Shalom's religious ed was outside when we were worshiping. It was like we were singing to one another, songs of peace, songs to worship our shared God. But then there were times in that summer where we were reading John, and Jesus was like trolling the religious authorities. The Judeans, one translator reads, the Jews, says another. And seminary covered this problem, right? I knew it was a problem. But when those words are amplified, such that others can hear them, you sense their ominous danger. Chapter 8, the chapter we read from today, we never read from it in worship except on today. It is beautiful to know that the truth will set us free, but at what cost? Historically, Christians, Martin Luther himself, has used these very texts to justify violence towards Jews and Muslims and indigenous folks on every continent. We have used these texts to erect walls between us and our neighbors, confident apparently that not only did we get it right, but we are the new chosen people, exclusive of all others. We believe that these walls are the mighty fortress, the bulwark never failing, as the translation many of us grew up singing says. We've erected walls and allowed ourselves to believe that we've engaged in spiritual warfare and that its purpose is to annihilate false belief in God. But that is completely unfaithful to both the hymn and the psalm on which it's based. Our God is a refuge, a place to seek safety and shelter during danger, a refuge and strength, a very present help in times of trouble. Over the last week, I have, and I know you have too, really wrestled with competing accounts, opinions, even truths, though I would not capitalize that word, about what is happening in the Holy Land. And I realized that what I wanted to do was create walls based on data that gave me empirical distance from the conflict. I wanted to ignore feelings in favor of facts. And I had them. I knew what had been happening in Israel and Palestine. I had studied it throughout my education. I'd followed it on the news. I had erected these walls around myself, prepared to triumph in my rightness. I mean, why be righteous when you can just be right? Right? The trouble is, people I love and respect were telling me about their pain. They were telling me that all the facts were making it difficult for them to grieve. Our God is a refuge and strength, a very present help in times of trouble. In truth, when we ensconce ourselves behind walls of our own making, we are what Luther calls theologians of glory. We look for accolades of those who see our genius, our scathing wit, our rightness. Luther says in the Heidelberg Disputation, the person deserves to be called a theologian, however, who understands the visible and the backside of God, seen through suffering and the cross. And that's the thing. Our call in this moment, our call as those saved not by works but by grace which is a gift through faith. We can express our opinions. We can write to our congressperson to push for a peace that comes with equity and justice for Israeli and Palestinian alike. And that may be the very right thing to do, but if we are not present with our neighbor in their pain, then we are nothing more than a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal, as St. Paul said, if it is all done without love. Obviously, the council and I wrote to you a statement about what is happening in Gaza and Israel, one that I hope was filled with nuance, but also reflective of the kind of radical neighbor love where a Lutheran church opens its doors, even taking down its cross, in order that a synagogue may have a temporary home while it rebuilds after violence, right? The kind of love that stands in solidarity with a vandalized Islamic center, right? The kind of love that recognizes we are on native land. The kind of love that stands against white supremacy. The kind of love that says love is love is love. The kind of love that breaks down walls. That kind of love is a mighty fortress. The kind of love that at the call of God is to our neighbors a very present help in times of trouble. Amen.